This happens when somebody dies, right? So when somebody's alive, they have this concept of ownership. I have my wealth, I have my possessions, I have my car, this belongs to me. And when you die, you don't own anything anymore. All of the things that you had, that you owned, they don't belong to you anymore. So who do they belong to? They automatically transfer to your heirs. And the heir, H-E-I-R, not A-I-R, H-E-I-R, your heirs are the people who are going to be inheriting from you because they're your relatives. So we have these specific rules in Islam. Now, what is the wisdom behind inheritance in Islam? Well, the idea is that who's has priority to your possessions and your belongings and your money and all of your items and your clothing, everything that you had, who has priority? Family. Your family has number one priority. So what does that teach you? It teaches you about, number one, the importance of the family system in Islam. Because if these people are going to be inheriting from you, then there's something special about them. There's something that you or society or the Muslim community should have been doing such that they're deserving and they're worthy of inheriting from you. The importance of having a strong family system. The importance of having functional families that respect one another. The importance of families that got each other's back when they need support. That's why they're going to be inheriting. That's the way family is supposed to be. Now, if in America, the family system is broken, if in Europe, the family system is broken, and it's breaking in different parts of the world because of selfishness and individualism and all of that, that doesn't somehow say that inheritance, rules or laws is a problem. It actually means that people need to restore that family balance that exists. So there's an ultimate wisdom behind inheritance. The second wisdom is that it reminds people that you are not in control of your wealth. When you're alive, you could do whatever you want with your wealth. You can spend it this way, you can spend it that way. But when you die, as a Muslim, you have an obligation to distribute this wealth according to the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has fixed it. So there's many Muslims, what they do is say, well, no, this son was really good to me, and this son, he didn't, I told him not to go to this college, I told him to go to the other college. So we're going to cut his inheritance in half. As you don't have any right to do that. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you how this wealth is going to be distributed. So you are reminded that it doesn't matter what you want. And it doesn't matter what you think. Even though you think you own this money, you could do whatever you want with it. When you die, you cannot do whatever you want with it. You can't take it in your grave. It's not going to help you on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And you cannot just give it to whomever you want. So it's a good test to remind you about that. And lastly, it's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are many people who will come and they say, I really don't care. I say, it's in the Quran. Allah is telling you to distribute your shares this way. I say, well, Allah will understand. I hear some weird answers, Allah will understand, or, I'll explain it to him. I've actually heard that. One person said, I'll explain it to Allah. Why I didn't give to the other daughter. What? Astaghfirullah. Why didn't you give to the other daughter? I told her, she should be a doctor. And she became an English major. And I got very upset. So therefore, I'm going to cut her out of inheritance. You can't do that. You cannot do that. That's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a test of obedience to see whether or not you're going to actually follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you. So you have to make sure that the rules that we're going to be covering today, they apply when you die. Now, if you lived in Medina during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and you're among the Sahaba, or you're among the Tabi'een, the generation that came after the companions, right? You didn't have to write a will. Because what would happen in that country, in that area, in that city, if you die, automatically your money is automatically going to be distributed according to the rules of the Quran that we're going to discuss. But if you live in America today, which we all do, it's not going to apply. The rules of inheritance, Jazakumullah khairan. MashaAllah, that's quite a lot. So the rules of inheritance will not automatically go into effect. So that means that if it's an obligation in Islam to make sure your wealth is being divided correctly, and it's not going to automatically be divided correctly if you live in America, then that means you have a responsibility as a Muslim. I have a responsibility as a Muslim to make sure that we have, to make sure that we have either a will or a trust that is put in place that's going to make sure that these rules kick in upon our death. So I'm going to be going over some sample wills and how the wills work and all of that stuff near the end. If you ever have any questions, you can just email us, info@calislamic.com. That's our website, and we'll give you information. California Islamic University is the school that I'm with, inshallah. Now the Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith, Sahih al-Bukhari, it's authentic hadith, he said, it is not befitting for a Muslim who has something to make a will of to remain for 2 nights without having one's last will and testament written and kept ready with oneself. So if you have something to give away, you have to have that will ready. Now this was talking about wasiyah actually, but it applies in our context of just even a normal will. And I'll explain what wasiyah is in a little bit, bequest in a little bit. So far, few more rules we extract from here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is that males will get a portion, females will get a portion. It's ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the requirement for somebody to inherit from another person in Islam? Besides being a family member, the second is that they must be alive for a moment after the person that they're inheriting from has died. So let's say father and son, they're traveling together and they're in a car accident. Father dies from the accident immediately. Son is still bleeding out. He dies 30 minutes later. Does the son inherit from the father? He's already dead. According to Islam, yes, he does. He will inherit because he remained alive, and we know that he remained alive for 30 minutes after the father had already died. So what's going to happen now? The son is going to inherit from the father the share that the son is supposed to get. And then, now that the son has died, adding to whatever money the son had, the son is going to pass on their money to all of their heirs. So the money has already transferred. The transfer took place. Now, if they both die in a plane crash, and they both die at the same time, or you cannot tell who died first, none of them are going to inherit from the other. All right. So whichever one dies first, the father can inherit from the son can inherit from the father, depending on who died first. Just as an example. So the requirement is that if you're alive for a moment after the person has died, you will inherit from that person if you're one of the heirs. So that's another rule that we extract from this verse. The second is a rule, or the next is a rule that is extracted from a hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said that a person who has murdered the person who they're going to inherit from, they're excluded from inheritance. So if somebody actually ends up killing, this happens in some cultures, it's happened in the past times. People will kill their uncle, or they kill their parent, or they kill someone else in order to try and get their inheritance out. If they were involved in any capacity in the killing of that person, they are blocked and excluded from inheritance. They get nothing. This is the one big exception to the rule where people get skipped over. They get nothing. This was clarified by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And lastly, before we move to the next verse, it says taraka, right? Mimma taraka. You will inherit whatever that person leaves behind. Now, when someone is leaving something behind, they're leaving behind what we call what they leave behind. In Arabic, it's called tarika. From taraka, what you leave. Tarika is all that you've left. And what it means is everything that's in your ownership. That means your clothes. That means the toys that you had in your closet. That means the dishes that belong to you. That means everything that's in your ownership. Now the problem is, in America or in modern day economies, ownership is not the way it used to be. So there's ownership where you own something. There's partnership where you partly own something, right? You own 50-50 or you own 25% between 4 partners. But there's a different type of ownership that's known as joint ownership. Like joint ownership with right of survival. So if you have a bank account, for example, with someone, and you have a joint bank account, does that necessarily mean, according to law, that you own 50-50 in the account? It doesn't mean that. But yet you have access to the money and the other person has access to the money. It's considered to be joint ownership, but it's not considered partnership, 50-50 ownership. Same thing when it comes to a house. When spouses have property owned together, they'll have, or sometimes they'll have one, and they'll have what's called ownership or joint ownership with right of survival. So if one of them dies, the other person will inherit the entire thing. So if you said that they own 50-50, let's just say hypothetically, then technically the 50%, when you die, that 50% is going to go to your heirs. It's not going to automatically transfer as a gift over to the other person who was on the account with you. But that's the way property works. That's the way sometimes joint bank ownership works. So this becomes a really big problem in trying to determine inheritance, especially for people who have a lot of these joint accounts. When it comes to pension plans, when it comes to insurance collection, when it comes to even like 401k, IRA, Roth 401k beneficiaries and all of that, it becomes a problem. So one of the best ways to do this is to consult a lawyer, or you can figure it out on your own, of how to break out of the concept of joint ownership. Because the concept of joint ownership is not something that really has a foundation in Islamic law, because there's an aspect of what's called gharar there. There's an aspect of uncertainty. So you need to break out of that uncertainty and clearly define who owns what. And this is the problem with even many families. They have like a joint pool of money together, but no one knows how much each one owns. And then all of a sudden there's a split in the family, there's a problem in the family, and they say, well, I want to get my share out. But there's no share for you, because it's not an equal. One person says, I contributed $20,000. That person contributed $3,000. But we're family, we take care of one another. But then the family broke up. Family broke apart, everything got messed up. So what do we do now? How do we reclaim what our right is? Problem is, concept of joint ownership makes things problematic. So it's very important to have the idea of specified ownership as a partner or as a percentage in whatever wealth you have. Okay, moving to the next verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُوصِيكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي أَوْلَادِكُمْ. That God commands you with regards to your children, in terms of when it comes to distribution of wealth for your children. لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنثَيَيْنِ. It says each share, for the male is the portion of two females. Okay? Now this is a concept that, some people have a problem with. They're like, well, why is this happening, and why is that happening? Why does a male get, double the share, and does it always happen that way, and is this discrimination and all of that? Understand the concept of Islam as a whole. Concept of Islam as a whole is that every single heir is going to be getting a share of the inheritance. According to what? Why do some people get more and some people get less? Why does a male that's from the same line get more and the female gets half of that? Well, all of this comes back down to the general needs and the general responsibilities. So in Islam, the male has been given a greater financial responsibility towards the family than the female has. And there's a very clear reason for that, right? This is the way societies have generally been throughout most of the world, and even till today, outside of maybe, Southern California and some other places where you have these dual income families and the housing prices are skyrocketing because of that, everyone can afford all of these things. The reality is that usually you have kind of this division of labor within the family structure. And the men are generally working, more than the women are going to be working. And what ends up happening is, in Islam, because of that division, and this part of the nature of people, in terms of some people got to take care of the household duties, some people focus more on the work duties. The man is responsible for taking care of the household financially. So if you're in a relationship where the woman works full-time and the man works full-time, the man is responsible for paying the entire rent of the home. He's responsible for paying the groceries. He's responsible for taking care of the upkeeps and the needs and the basic clothing and food, shelter, all of that stuff in the woman, even if the woman makes more than him. It's very common, I get this question. So yeah, but my wife is a doctor, she makes more than me. I don't make that much money. Says, is it okay if, can she contribute? I said, no, she doesn't have to contribute. Islamically, she doesn't have any obligation to contribute to the basic needs of the household. Now look, if you want to buy her a Kia or a Hyundai, right, and she's like, no, I want a Mercedes, right? Or she's a techie and she's like, I want a Tesla, right? And you're like, well, that doesn't come under basic needs, right? So whatever you were going to spend for that Kia, she can upgrade with her own money to that Mercedes that she wants, but she doesn't need to necessarily buy the basic car because that's considered a basic need. Cell phone bill and groceries and all of that stuff is covered. It's a man's responsibility whether he makes more or whether he makes less. So what happens is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took that into account. And He said, well, if that's the case, and if the male is responsible financially for the family, then they should also be getting a way where they're going to be getting a greater share of the inheritance so they can spend on the family. Because they're going to have to spend on the kids, they're going to have to spend on the wife, they're going to have to spend on, their parents or whatever it may be. So because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put different rules into place. And we can talk more, in a lot of detail about that. But let's go to the board and write our rules. And we're going to keep coming up with our rules. So what's the first rule we've learned so far? The first rule is that a male, especially, it says, what does it say? Yusikumullahu fi awladikum. Allah commands you regarding your children. So if children, we're talking about, what is a male child and a female child called? What are they called? What's a male child called? A son. What's a female child called? A daughter. So right now, we're not talking about males and females in general. We're talking about sons and daughters. Okay? So the ratio is here. Different color? Bigger? That didn't work. We go with green. There's no black. There we go. How's that? Good. Better? Yeah. Okay. So far we have son and daughter. Ratio is 2-1. Okay? So let's say somebody dies. Okay? Father dies. A man dies. He leaves behind one son. He leaves behind one daughter. What percentage do each of them get? How much does the son get? 66%, or 2/3 to be specific. And how much does the daughter get? 1/3. So you have 2/3 and 1/3, which makes 1. So you basically have 2-1. 2-1 means that you have to have 3 shares. So you take the 100%, you split it into 3 shares. Son gets 2, girl gets 1, 2/3, 1/3. It's your fraction. I have it here somewhere. Here we go. That was not supposed to happen. Okay, that's okay. Normally, you're not supposed to see all the bullet points. But what happens is PowerPoint doesn't like Mac, and Mac doesn't like PowerPoint. So they're like, mutually, mutual dislike. But that's okay. So I'm going to be giving you the answers. And actually, I'll show you the answers later. So son and daughter, 2/3 and 1/3, right? So now we say that, and we say, okay, well, wait a minute. Are males always going to inherit more? Right? So this is a question. You say, well, does this always apply? Men always get more and women always get less? That's not true. So it's very careful. You have to be very careful. Men do not always get more. So I'm going to give you a scenario. Okay, some of you know it, some of you don't know it. Someone dies, a woman dies, and she leaves behind a husband, a father, and a daughter. Does anyone know how much the husband gets? Half? No. 1/8? No. 1/6? No. I heard it. 1/4. Okay. How much does the father get? 1/8? No. 1/4. And how much does the daughter get? Half. Okay. So now I'll give you the answer there. Husband gets 1/4. Father gets 1/4. Daughter gets 1/2. I know we have not learned this yet, but what does that show you? Do males always get more than the females? Well, the daughter is getting double the husband, and she's a female, he's a male. Daughter is getting double the father, she's a female, and he's a male. So this idea of, men always get more and women don't, that's not true. It's men and women in the same line when it comes to sons and daughters. When it comes to brothers and sisters, they will be getting ratio of 2-1. It does not apply across the board for all males and all females. So it's not a male and female thing. And even if it was, it's about the responsibility, the financial responsibility that exists. Okay? I just wanted to mention that because what happens is this is a common cause of confusion for people. The laws that we have today, the laws that have existed outside of Islam inheritance law, they're all made by man. They're man-made, human-made laws. And what happens is in the past, women used to be deprived of inheritance. In some places today, China, India, they're still deprived of inheritance. Sadly, some, ignorant Muslims, they also deprive women of inheritance, which is not right. But that was an extreme. So one extreme, women don't even get the right of inheritance. Now what has happened? People jump to the other side of the extreme. What's the other extreme that we live in now? The rest of the family is deprived. Your wife gets everything. Your parents, mother, father, nothing. Son, daughter, nothing. Can brother, sister? No, they're out. No one cares about them. Only thing that matters is spouse. That's the primary relationship. So what happened is people went from one extreme and they jumped to the other extreme. Alhamdulillah, Islam is actually that balance, and it's been showing people that balance, whether they want to take it or not take it. Okay, so that's that verse. Next verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِن كُنَّ نِسَاءً فَوْقَ اثْنَتَيْنِ فَلَهُنَّ ثُلُثَا مَا تَرَكَ. Says if there are more than two females, for them is 2/3 of the inheritance. وَإِن كَانَتْ وَاحِدَةً فَلَهَا النِّصْفُ. And he says, if there's only one, then they get half. Right? So we're going to look at daughters in particular, right? We're talking about daughters. So what options do we have for daughters? We got she can get 1/2 or 2/3 if there's more than one, right? So I just want to leave this on the board for you while we, process this. So now that we see that, we have 2 rules so far. Okay, only we learned 2 rules. Now the Prophet ﷺ, he said, hadith narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, he said, give the shares of inheritance to the people who are entitled to them, and whatever is left goes to the closest male relative. Okay? So now, next rule. So R, anyone know what R means? Remainder. Yeah, the remainder, right? Whatever's left over. Okay? So the rule is, once you've distributed all the fractions that we have fractions here and there, the remainder will go to the closest male that's left. So let's take a look at some examples. Somebody dies. They leave behind 1 daughter and 1 nephew and no other relatives. Start with the shares, the fractions always first. How much does the daughter get? Half, because she's 1. She gets half. How much does the nephew get? Half, because the remainder, after half has been taken, the nephew is going to get half. 50% and 50%. Good. Next one. Someone dies. Yes, question on that? The 1/2 and 2/3? No. It's daughter only, not for son. Only daughter. Oh, who passed away? It doesn't matter who passed away. Yeah, it doesn't. In this state, it doesn't matter who passed away. Yeah. We're coming to that. Yeah, we're coming to that. Yeah, inshallah, coming soon. So next question. Person dies, leaves behind 2 daughters and 2 uncles. How much do the 2 daughters get? 2/3. How much do the 2 uncles get? How? Two uncles combined, how much do they get? 1/3. How much does each uncle get? 1/6. There you go. Okay, good. So we're good so far, right? Next, so there's the answers right there. Okay, so 2/3. Uncles get 1/3, and then you split. 2 uncles, 2 daughters, 2 uncles. Right, split. Next verse. وَلِأَبَوَيْهِ لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمَا السُّدُسُ مِمَّا تَرَكَ إِن كَانَ لَهُ وَلَدٌ. I know it's a little bit small here. As for the parents of the deceased, each one of them will get 1/6 in case of his having left a child. Okay? So parents will get 1/6 if there is a child. And it says, فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ وَلَدٌ وَوَرِثَهُ أَبَوَاهُ فَلِأُمِّهِ الثُّلُثُ. And if for his mother, if he's left no children and his parents are his only heirs, then his mother is going to get 1/3. فَإِن كَانَ لَهُ إِخْوَةٌ فَلِأُمِّهِ السُّدُسُ. And if they have brothers that are surviving, then the mother will get 1/6. Okay? So we're talking primarily about the mom here, right? So the mom generally is going to get how much? What's the general rule? Mom is supposed to get? Oh no. فَلِأُمِّهِ الثُّلُث. Right? Mom is supposed to get 1/3. But she goes down to 1/6 by whom? Who causes her to go down? Now, mom shouldn't get all upset because of this, right? Children cause her to go down, and brothers cause her to go down to 1/6. So let's write this down. Okay. So far, so good? All right. So that's what's going to happen. So what we're learning here is there's this new principle that we come up with, is that this is the default share, but someone's share can be reduced in Islamic law in inheritance because of the presence of another heir. If these people pass away first, mom is back to upped to 1/3. Okay? So now that's a principle, right? And I'm going to give you one last principle before we mention anything. There is something known as the exclusion principle. So this is the reduction principle. You have a share, the share gets cut because there's another heir. This is known as the reduction. There's also exclusion. So the exclusion principle is if you have a father or if you have a son, the father and the son or the son can block brothers and sisters that exist. If there's a father or son alive, they will block brothers and sisters. How do you know that? Because look, if there are brothers, can the brothers block the mother? Do they block the mother? They reduce the mother. So brothers will reduce the mother, but what about the father? The father will actually block the brothers. So they block brothers and sisters, father and son both. All right. So, I'm going to give you examples now. Okay? Somebody dies, leaves behind a father, leaves behind a mother, leaves behind a daughter. Okay? So, father, mother, daughter. So, mom and dad and a daughter. Let's start with the daughter, because the daughter's actually pretty easy. Okay? So, is there a son? There's no son, right? So the 2-to-1 ratio only kicks in when you have son and daughter. So that rule is done. So we have daughter, no son. What can the daughter potentially be? Half or 2/3? So in this case, how many daughters are there? One daughter. How much she gets? Half. So daughter gets half. This part we're good so far. Now we go to mom. So we're going backwards, How much does mom get? Mom can either get 1/3 or 1/6. She has two options. Do we give her 1/3 or do we give her 1/6? 1/6. Why are we giving mom 1/6? Because there is children. Who are the children? The daughter. So the daughter caused mother to go down to 1/6. So we got half for the daughter. We got 1/6 for the mother. How much was the father supposed to get? Actually, we didn't even cover that yet. But it doesn't even matter. Father was supposed to get 1/6, but let's say we give him his 1/6, okay? Father gets 1/6. We got half, 1/6, and 1/6. How much is that? That's 5/6. What's left over? 1/6 left. Who gets the 1/6? The closest to? Closest male relative. So we have mom, daughter, and father. Who's the closest? There's only one male relative. Father gets the other 6th. So how much does the father end up getting? He gets 2/6, which is 1/3. Exactly. Father gets 1/3, mom gets 1/6, and a daughter gets half. So we're good so far. I'll put on the slide again for you to look. Next example. Somebody dies, leaves behind a father, mother, and 2 daughters. How much the daughters get? 2/3. How much mother gets? 1/6. What is the remainder? 2/3 and 1/6. You got to multiply 2/3 times 2 becomes 4/6 plus 1/6, 5/6. What's left? 1/6. 1/6 goes to the father. So because there was an extra daughter, father just lost the 1/6. If there was one daughter, father would have gotten his extra 6th and got 2/6 instead. 2 daughters split the 2/3. Okay? All right. So far so good. Last one. Okay? Person dies. They leave behind father, mother, 2 brothers. Father, mother, 2 brothers. What ends up happening? Huh? Okay, father. What do the brothers get? 1/4 each? No. 2/3? The brothers get 2/3? Daughters get 2/3. The brothers get 2/3? How much do the brothers get? Mother, father, 2 brothers. Anybody? Huh? Blocked by who? Blocked by the father. Brothers get nothing. Father blocked the brothers. Father and son blocks the brothers and sisters. Brothers get 0. They get nothing. Everything goes to mom and dad. Right? So how much? So we got, I'll just show it to you here. Let's go through it. Here, we got this one right here. Father, mother, and 2 brothers. How much do 2 brothers get? 2 brothers get nothing. They get 0. Why do they get 0? Because dad blocks the brothers. See this rule over here? Father blocks brothers and sisters. If there was a son, he'd block the brothers and sisters. Does that principle make sense? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, good. Let's move on because we have very little time left and we have to finish these slides. So let's see. And for some reason, just stop moving. I don't know what I did. Okay, here we go. And then he says, مِن بَعْدِ وَصِيَّةٍ يُوصِي بِهَا أَوْ دَيْنٍ. So it says, after deduction for any bequest that he may have made and any debt. So all the rules of inheritance Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning so far, he said all of this is going to happen after a wasiyah. Wasiyah means a bequest. Bequest is different from inheritance, it's part of inheritance. But bequest is something that you're allowed to give to the people whom you want. So I said the general rule is you don't get to do whatever you want with your money. Allah has decided all the shares for you. But He's allowed what's called a wasiyah. And wasiyah means you're allowed to choose a little bit of your money who you want to give it to. And that inheritance kicks in after the wasiyah first happens. So wasiyah in order of priority happens. And the dain is a debt. Any money that you owe and then you die, your people who you owe money to, what are they called? Debtor or creditor? Creditors, right? So your creditors have a priority right over your heirs. So let's say you die, $100,000 in your bank account, and you have $100,000 in debt. And your children come and we're going to inherit money. They're not going to inherit anything because the creditors actually have more of a priority over the family members to that money. So they will go and get their money first. That's what this verse is saying. I'm just saying all of what they own, yeah. Assuming there's nothing else, right? All of it will end up going to the debtor or whatever portion ends up going. So who has number one priority? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying the wasiyah and the debt have priority over the family members taking their share of inheritance, right? And there's one last priority, and that is your funeral expenses, okay? So if you think about the cost in Southern California, in LA, what is the cost of a burial plot and the cost of getting buried? How much? 10,000, 13,000 with the burial plot and everything. It's about $10,000 to $13,000. If somebody dies with $13,000 and all of that money goes in their funeral expense, their heirs get nothing. Nothing is left. So what happens is that the first priority when you die goes to your funeral expense, because you need to go into the ground. Someone has to, you're not just going to sit there. So you need to be buried. So that's going to be paid from your own money. You don't go to the community members. You don't use zakah money for that. It comes from your money that you've left behind first. Okay? Number one. Number two, it's actually debt. Priority is the debt afterwards. The people you owe money, they're going to collect that money because it belongs to them. And the third is what's called a bequest. And I'm going to explain what a bequest is right now. So what a bequest is, it's basically a directive that you put in your will what you want to happen after death. It involves money, but it involves other things like advanced care directive for healthcare. Some people, if you've ever been to a funeral, some people maybe, they're troublemakers. They'll be like, no, we should carry the body this way. Don't carry the body that way. You could put in your will, that person, I know that person has no official leadership position at my funeral because, I want things to be smooth. I don't want any fitna or drama or anything like that at my funeral. That comes as part of your wasiyah. Wasiyah means your directive, anything you're telling people after you die you want to happen. That's what it actually means, right? So you can bequest and decide up to 1/3 of your wealth how you want it to be spent. You can give it to your friends. Let's say you had best friend in life. You say, this person was always there for me. I want to leave behind 10% of all my money to my best friend. And you know what? There was that other, there's that great organization, Islamic Relief. I want to give them 5%. And there's that other awesome, California Islamic University. I want to leave behind 5% to them as well. Educate some people, You can do that. So you can do that up to a maximum total of 1/3 of your wealth. You cannot exceed 1/3. So why can you not exceed 1/3? Because let's say you say, I want to give 75% in charity. Like these billionaires nowadays, mashallah, they're non-Muslim billionaires. I'm giving all my money away in charity, which is nice. At the same time, in Islam, you can't do that. Why? Because you're depriving your heirs. So you cannot deprive them. So you have up to 1/3. 1/3 is your max for everything. All of it combined. Yes. Wasiyah can be verbal, but then what happens if somebody challenges it and we don't have proof, you're going to end up in court and it becomes a big problem. So it's better written. Can you what? So that's the thing. So exception number one is maximum is 1/3. Exception number two, you cannot top up any heirs that are already receiving. Otherwise, that would defeat the purpose of the fixed shares. So you cannot give to a son because the son already inherits. You cannot give to a father because the father already inherits. But what you can do is, remember the brothers got blocked? So you could put the brothers in there. And you know what's going to happen? You don't know what's going to happen after you die. You write it and you die 5 years later. If the father was alive that was going to block the brothers get the 10% from your wasiyah. If the father died, right, before you died and then you died, and in your will it says 10% goes to the brothers are already inheriting because the father is not there blocking them anymore. So they don't get the 10%. That 10% is automatically canceled out, and that part of the wasiyah is canceled. Okay, so that's the way it works. So you can do that, and that works. Another thing is, what about non-Muslims? So people always ask, well, what about leaving inheritance to non-Muslims? I'm a convert, I have non-Muslim family members and this and that. Wasiyah doesn't have to be to a Muslim. You can actually give up to 1/3 to a non-Muslim. People say, well, what about adopted children? There's no such thing, adoption, right? But like you kind of have a child in your family. It's not your real child. You're taking care of them, all of that stuff. What about, I want to leave them some wealth behind? You can leave them wasiyah behind, up to 1/3 of your wealth. So you're allowed to do all of those things. You can make it conditional too, if you wanted to. So you could put in a condition. If my best friend graduates from California Islamic University, they will get 10% of my wealth. And if they don't graduate, they're not getting the 10%. So you're allowed to put a conditional wasiyah as well if you want to. The next verse says, آباؤكم وأبناؤكم لا تدرون أيهم أقرب لكم نفعا. It says, your parents and your children, you don't know which one of them is nearer to you in bringing you benefit, right? Meaning, Allah knows exactly the order of who gets priority over who. Some people will say, well, it should be children over parents, parents over children, brothers should be closer, spouse should be this way. It's saying you don't know exactly the details of how this is going to work out. Allah knows best of how family relationships work, and He set some standard that applies to all Muslims across the board, all people across the board. And then He says, فَرِيضَةً مِّنَ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا. This is a requirement from Allah, and Allah is the all-knowing and the all-wise. So reminding you, Allah, He knows what He's doing when He gives you these rules. He is the all-wise. He understands what is best for people when He mentions these things. So if you think about this idea, all these shares that are specified, right, and the relatives that get this much money, one of the wisdoms behind it is that it's going to block disputes between family members. Because if it was left to people, they would be like, oh, I think I like you a little bit better. Oh, you're a little bit nicer. Oh, this year, no, you're off now. You've been nicer this year. Last year you were better. You need to do this to make better. It's going to cause so many family problems. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has defined these things so we don't have all of these problems. If it was left for people, it would be chaos, right? So some people will come along and say, well, what about if there's an exception to the rule? What if I have a, disobedient child and, they're not nice to me and this and that and, my spouse or whatever it is? Exceptions don't make the rule. And Islam came to make general rules for people across the board. If you wanted to do something during your lifetime and give money to someone else during your lifetime or something like that, let's say you have a mother and you have a large family and you said, my father has passed away, my mother is there, I want to take care of her. Okay, I hear this all the time. I want to take care of my mom. Can I give her more inheritance in my will? No. I said, why don't you take care of your mom now? Why don't you buy her a house right now? But there's no money left for me then. And you don't really care that much about your mom. So you want to keep your money your entire life until you die because you don't want to be in any difficult circumstance. You don't want to take care of your mom right now. Just give her the minimum. But then when you die, you want to exclude all the other family members. You want to give it to your mom when you die. Sharia doesn't work that way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made something specific. You want to gift to your mom? Gift to your mom right now. Otherwise she's going to get the share that she's supposed to get when she passes away. It's all related to this point? Yeah, inshallah. Go ahead. So it's a good question. So normally in your lifetime, you should not be discriminating between your children, your brothers and sisters, unless there is a reason. What is a reason? Scholars have explained there's two reasons. Reason number one, in your lifetime only, not in inheritance. In your lifetime, you can discriminate if one of them is really on the path of Allah and they're doing something very good, you can gift them a little bit more. And the second is, you can gift the person less if you know that they're going to be spending it in something haram in your lifetime. But when it comes to inheritance, once you die, it doesn't matter. If that child is a drug dealer, he's going to inherit your money. You should have gone ahead and you should have distributed that in your lifetime and spent it in charity or given it to the other child or whatever it is. You did not do that in your lifetime. The rules of inheritance will kick in, and he's going to just up his game and be selling ice on the street or something like that. Yeah. No, it cannot be based on your feelings. It cannot be based on your love. This is prohibited by the Prophet ﷺ.
So the underage son or daughter inherits money. Does the guardian have the right to use it for his discretion?
No. So the guardian does not have. If a child inherits money, the guardian's responsibility is to make sure to preserve it for the child. They're allowed to use it a little bit in order to keep necessary expenses, but they can't eat it all. That's a huge sin in Islam. Been mentioned in the Quran many, many times. Yes. The wife? Oh, we're getting to her. We haven't gotten to her yet. We're getting there. Husband and wife is coming. Husband's not there either. Yeah. So alhamdulillah, we're coming. All right. So now comes the wife, husband and wife. وَلَكُمْ نِصْفُ مَا تَرَكَ أَزْوَاجُكُمْ إِن لَّمْ يَكُن لَهُنَّ وَلَدٌ. And you get half of what your wives leave behind if they have no children. I'm just going to read the translation. But if they have a child, then they will have 1/4 of what they leave behind after deduction of any bequest has made or any debt. So it's talking about husbands, right? What your wives leave behind. So you have a wife dies, she leaves behind money to the wife's spouse, which is the husband. So husband gets either what? Half or 1/4. When does the husband get decreased to 1/4? Children, exactly, right? And then it goes, and it says, وَلَهُنَّ رُبُعُ مِمَّا تَرَكْتُمْ. And for them, meaning for the wives, is 1/4 of what you leave behind if you have no children. But if you have a child, they will have 1/8 what you leave behind after deduction of bequest that you've made or any debt. So now we got husband and wife. Okay? Got husband, wife. 1/2, 1/4, 1/4, 1/8. Okay, this is with children. So now we got the shares of husband and wife. Okay, so now here's the question: why are spouses even included in the first place? 10, inshallah. So why are spouses even included in the inheritance in the first place? They're not blood family members. So the fact that a spouse has been included means that the bond of marriage is considered to be something very important in Islam. That they actually got included into the family. In the past, spouses used to not inherit in many cultures and societies in the world because they're not blood, right? They can be separated. They can be divorced. So that just shows you the sanctity of the marriage contract when it's there. So let's take a look at some examples. Someone dies. A wife dies. She leaves behind a husband, a father, and a daughter. So we're going to start with the easiest ones first. How much does the daughter get? Daughter gets half because she's one. How much does the husband get? 1/4. Why? Because there's a child. So it got reduced to 1/4 because of the daughter. Okay? How much is left? How much does the dad get? 1/4 because there's 1/4 left. Okay? Dad gets 1/4. Next example. We got mother, father, son, daughter, and husband. Okay, I'm going to write this on the board. So I don't know. It's a big family. Mother, father, son, daughter, and husband. This is mom, dad, mother, father. What I say? Son, daughter, and husband, right?
So just one son, one daughter.
Yeah, just one each. Just make it easier. Okay. This is what we got. So let's start. Who are the easiest ones? Not really. Because if we had only daughter, it'd be easy. But we got son and daughter. We got to do 2 to 1. So let's just do son and daughter, 2 to 1. So how much are they getting? We don't know yet. We don't know yet. So we're going to do it later. So now, how much is the husband getting? Husband is easy. 1/4 because of children, right? How much is the mother getting? Why were you going to do mother first instead of father? Because the father will become nearest relative who gets a remainder, so it becomes a problem. We're going to do mother. Mother gets 1/6. Why 1/6? Children. Okay. What does father get? I know we haven't actually gone into the details of the father. Not the whole, well, because then the son and daughter are supposed to get remainder. Okay? So I'm just going to put 1/6 here for now. And I'm going to show you what it is later. Let me see if I have father coming or not. Where is father? He was somewhere in these notes. Inshallah, don't worry. He's coming back. Anyways, father generally gets 1/6 or 1/6 plus the remainder because he can be the nearest inheriting family member. Okay? So what we have here is, so far we got husband has 1/4. We're at the bottom here, okay? Husband has 1/4. Father gets 1/6 plus the remainder, which I was talking about because he's the nearest relative. And then we got, we're not on this example, sorry. We're on this example here. Mother We said 1/6, it's correct. Father gets 1/6. Now, can the father get the remainder? No, because if the son is there, the son will get the priority of the remainder, and he's going to share his remainder with who? The daughter, okay? And then we have, skip this, I'll come back to this. Skip this. Husband, 1/4, 1/4, correct. Now we have to figure out, okay, so if the remainder goes to the son and daughter, how much have we divided? We got 1/6, 1/6, and 1/4. How much is that? So that's 2/6 and 1/4. We got to put it over 12. 4/12 and 3/12, 7/12. What remains? 5/12. So we need to take 5/12 and split it 2-to-1 between son and daughter. So I'm not going to do the rest of the math for you because it's going to take a lot of time. But that's what you do. And you figure out the shares and you do it, okay? We can do that, but we're going to skip that part. Next one, husband, father, and 2 daughters. It's the same easy one. What do 2 daughters get? Don't look down. You already looked down. But what do 2 daughters get? 2/3. The easy one, right? What does the husband get? 1/4 because daughters are there, right? What does the father get in this case? He gets 1/6, but does he get the remainder as well? Who is the closest relative? It is the father because there's no son. So the father will get 1/6 as the default rule, plus he's going to get the remainder. So it ends up him getting the remainder, the whole, right? So what happens? Husband 1/4, daughters get 2/3, 1/6 plus the remainder. What ends up happening? 2/3 and 1/4 is how much? What is this? 3/12 plus 8/12. It's 11/12. Is that right? And then 1/12. Is that correct? Something's wrong. 2/3 and 1/4. What is 2/3 plus 1/4? Fraction-wise. Okay. Times 3. 3/12 times 4, 8/12. 8/12 plus, what was this? 3/12 becomes 11/12, right? So there's 1/12 left. Following so far? There's 1/12 is left. The father doesn't just get the remainder, because if the father got the remainder, he would get 1/12. But he's supposed to get 1/6 plus the remainder. So let's say you give the father 1/6, there's no remainder left, but here's the problem, you can't even give him 1/6. You're missing 1/12. So now we have a concern here, we got a problem here. So what has to happen here is we end up with 13/12, which is not 100%. It's more than 100%. So in this case, you have to make an adjustment, and this adjustment is called awl. And awl is where you reduce the fractions equally across the board, and it's pretty simple actually. So whoever was supposed to get 3/12, they're going to get 3/13. Whoever was supposed to get 2/12, they're going to get 2/13. You just replace the denominator from 12 to 13, that's the easy one. The difficult one, which I don't have time to cover in this session, you have to join the university, is when you end up having 11/12s and there's no remainder. There's no one left to say this person gets the remainder. So how do you redistribute the shares? It's called rad. It's a very difficult concept and it takes time, so we're not going to go through that, inshallah. So that is that, okay? Now we have more verses. And I put all these on one slide just to show you there's a lot more verses, and it takes a lot more time to go through, and it's very, very complex when it comes to brothers and sisters, half brothers, brothers from the mother side versus brothers from the sister side, versus full brother, paternal mothers, paternal brothers, maternal brothers, and all that stuff. So it's very complex. So it's actually very, very complex. Inheritance, more complex than people understand. So when you look at the complexity, what you realize is that this complexity, Muslim scholars were very good at math, and they actually developed the science of math to a completely different level. And one of the main people who used to be an expert in inheritance was Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. If you look at the word Khwarizmi, he's very popular in mathematics. This is the guy who wrote a book called Hisab al-Jabr wal-Muqabala. It's known as al-Jabr. What does al-Jabr sound like? Algebra. So he invented the term algebra, okay? And the guy's name is Khwarizmi. What does it sound like in a math term? Algorithm, that's right. So the word algorithm is named after this guy, Al-Khwarizmi, His book, Algebra, is named after his book. And most of this book is actually about Islamic inheritance. And people don't know that. So the science of algebra was being developed because they were working out how the problems of inheritance are going to be resolved from the Quran. So alhamdulillah, this is amazing. And we have so many other scholars who were doing so many things. But for shortage of time, we're going to skip some of that. So let's conclude that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَصِيَّةً مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. This is a commandment from Allah. And He used the word wasiyah, meaning it's a directive. So when you die, you use the word wasiyah, say, I direct people to do this after I die. Allah is saying, my wasiyah to you is to follow the rules of inheritance. Wallahu alimun halim. And Allah is the knowing and the patient, meaning He's not hasty to punish people. And then, and I'll give you some sample wills here. I have a bunch of examples. I could click on them and go through them, but we're not. Here's a few apps. You could download an app called Al-Mawarith, or you can go on this website. It'll do the calculations for you. The reason why I did that afterwards is so you appreciate and you don't have to go through all the fractions to do that anymore nowadays. Alhamdulillah. So here's a summary, and then I'll take some questions, inshallah. Summary is, what do you do when you calculate? You're going to make a list of all the heirs who are going to get some share or they're going to get residuary. You have to identify the heirs properly. So people will come to you and say, you know what? Okay, someone died, my father died, and he left behind, there's a brother. And you're like, oh, brother. Okay, brother's over here. Brother got excluded. Hold on. If the person is asking you a question, does it mean his brother or the brother of the deceased? Right? If it's his brother, then that's the son of the deceased. If it's the deceased brother, then it's the brother of the deceased. You always have to go back to the deceased. So when people ask questions, they usually ask questions the wrong way. You have to investigate and make sure you're not giving the wrong answer because they're asking the wrong question. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, eliminate all the people who are blocked and excluded. Rule number 3, write the share as a fraction. And rule number 4, you make adjustments that you need, if you need to make an adjustment. Last thing is, we need to write our will. And there's different wills out there. You can download them for free. Or you can go to the My Wasiyah. It's a pretty good website. And that's the cheap way of doing it. Or you could download like Quicken Will Maker Pro. I bought it for like $9 on sale. You could make a will. If you have a high net worth, you want to make a trust. Because what's called trust basically avoids probate. And probate means that your inheritance distribution ends up going into court. Ton of lawyers' fees and court fees and all of these things. If there's any dispute or problems in your family or potential problems, and you have a high net worth, you want to make a trust which prevents you from ever having to go to court, and you avoid probate. A will is cheaper, much easier. You could literally just write on one piece of paper, say, when I die, I want my inheritance distributed according to Islamic law. As long as nobody fights it, you're okay. If somebody fights it and says, well, according to Islamic law, one of your cousins comes along and says, well, I want a share because Islamic law has 10 different opinions, and according to my opinion, I made my own madhab, and my madhab should apply. Now, who's going to decide whether your madhab is this and that? So it's going to end up going to probate. So the judge is going to listen, and that person is going to convince the judge whether his understanding of his own religion of Sharia that he made, the madhab of whatever his name was or whatever, it's going to become a huge problem. So you want to have as much detail as you possibly can. A will is going to have even more details. It's going to say this, I revoke all my previous wills. I have this. Here are the fixed shares of inheritance according to such and such thing. If there's ever a dispute, go to the Fiqh Council of North America, and the opinion that they decide by 2/3 majority is going to be the final decision that happens. The more you clarify, the easier it is going to be for all of you. Okay? And if you have high net worth, you definitely want to make a trust. If you have shared property, if you have 401ks, if you have retirement accounts, if you have beneficiaries that are going to inherit whatever money or whatever it may be, you want to make sure that that gets put into a trust so that you have ownership is clearly defined. Questions? Yes, bismillah.
If somebody dies and writes a will that is not in accordance with the Sharia, and you inherit from that, is that money involved?
So, if you inherit from money that was not according to Sharia and you inherited from that, if there were other heirs that were trying to get that money, it's not halal for you. You need to give it to the proper heirs. If you have no way to do that, then you can take the money. There's no other option. Otherwise, you need to distribute it back to the lawful heirs. Okay? Yes. I can't hear you. We're not going to have time, but you can email me the scenario, inshallah. I'll work it out for you, inshallah. Anyone else that has not asked a question yet? No. Okay. What about orphans? To whom? They're caretakers? They're not blood, so no. But they can get what? Well, wasiyah up to 1/3. Yes. I mean, some kids are talking upstairs, so you're gonna have to speak louder. Yeah, I still can't hear you. If you're a convert, yeah.
Does your family still inherit?
Does your family still inherit? Okay, so this is a good question. So, generally, by default, they're not supposed to inherit, according to the majority of scholars. Because they say Muslims don't inherit from non-Muslims, non-Muslims don't inherit from Muslims. But some scholars have said that was only if they're non-Muslims at war with Islam. So in some cases, some scholars have said, yes, they will still inherit in that case. One of them was Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah and many other scholars have said that. So there's a difference of opinion on this issue, which regardless of which one you follow, you can still put a wasiyah for them if you wanted to.
And then if not, then your kids would just get it?
The what itself? It didn't. There's a hadith though. There's a hadith that's in Sahih Bukhari. It says that a Muslim doesn't inherit from a non-Muslim, non-Muslim doesn't inherit from a Muslim. It's there, but the question was, did that mean in the context of people who are at war with you, or in general? Imam Abu Hanifa, Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, they said this only applies for people who are at war with the Muslims. The other scholars, they said no, it applies in general. It should not happen because it's making non-Muslims stronger. That's the way it was perceived. Any other questions? Okay, alhamdulillah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in our knowledge and practice. And if you want to learn more about this subject, we have a class known as Islamic Law 2, which covers marriage, divorce, economic transactions, inheritance, and punishments, politics in Islam. So it's like it's a 10-week class we have. You can take it online as well, calislamic.com. And inshallah, you can ask me any questions if you want. Just email info@calislamic.com if you have any questions about inheritance or anything like that. Inshallah, may Allah increase us in knowledge and practice. Ameen. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nastaghfiruka Allah wa natubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
Inshallah, please join us downstairs for dinner and then we'll come back for Isha.